What was your "is this serious" moment? I worked for a grocery store, a big chain, probably the first one that comes to mind. I was a bagger and cart wrangler. There was this one overweight blonde woman, see Karen, who would come in all the time and cause no end of chaos. Examples of her antics include buying a 15-pound turkey, then coming in complaining it tasted bad and wanting to return it, presenting a platter with an empty carcass save for one piece of meat on one bone, buying a $37 plant, not watering it, and showing up a year and 6 months later, dead as a doornail, demanding a refund, and buying a grill using 10 gallons of gasoline as fuel, causing an understandable fire and explosion, then coming back with the receipt and charred grill demanding a refund. I could go on. This would happen weekly, if not bi-weekly. It got to the point where many cashiers would see her enter the store, turn off their light, and leave. Now when I say she made a fuss, I'm not talking your normal "I want to speak to your manager" type deal. Oh no, she would rant and rave, throw herself on the floor, roll around, throw things, call the police, 87 times that I witnessed, I kept count, and pull out her cell phone filming herself being victimized to report us to the media. She was eventually banned from the store, which took years. I heard stories that she began terrorizing our neighbor branch 7 blocks down the road. Story 2, I worked at an arcade and bowling alley combination that served food like a full restaurant. My position required me to deliver the food and take the dirty dishes to the back. One day, there was a group of about 6 people bowling, and they had ordered our sampler platter, which included a little bit of everything from the appetizers menu. I brought the platter out and set it down, asking if there was anything else they needed. Without really looking, one woman said, "We're good." As I began to turn around, she suddenly grabbed my arm and yanked me toward her, like I was her child, and shouted, "Where the hell are my chicken wings?" In disbelief at what was happening, I paused, looked at her, and then at the platter, eventually replying, "They're right there, ma'am," pointing to the small basket of wings on the platter. She let go and, with a skeptical expression, said, okay," as if she still didn't believe the wings were actually there. If I hadn't hated working there and if my shift had been any farther from ending in 10 minutes, I would have spoken to a manager. Instead, I didn't care enough to stay to get it sorted and just wanted to leave. Story 3. I worked in a somewhat popular restaurant, fast casual style. Think Chipotle, Panda Express, or Panera, and it was my first shift as a line cook by myself. I had already worked in the kitchen and knew how to do every position there, but this was my first time running the line alone. It was a busy night for us and we were short-staffed. By the time things finally slowed down, I was completely exhausted and hot as hell. I had been standing over 8 burners for about an hour and was finally taking my lunch break. I sat in the office where the air conditioning was blasting, and it was very much needed. My coworker, who was cashiering that day, took her lunch about 15 minutes after mine started. She saw me sitting in the office and immediately demanded that I get out of her spot. She told me that being a cashier was harder than being a line cook because she had to deal with the public. When I told her I wasn't moving, she told me to F off and was a bitch to me for the rest of the night. It took everything in me not to slap her, but instead I told my coworkers, who then told the manager on duty. Soon after, she was fired for stealing. Story 4. I just had one happen yesterday. I've been going to my local high school's running track to jog and exercise. Since lockdown, to park your car, you have to go through a driveway that is designated as one-way, marked with arrows. There's an exit on the other side of the parking lot. The soccer moms in town are notorious for parking their cars in this driveway and making it difficult to access the actual parking lot. As I pulled into the driveway, one of these women decided it was a brilliant idea to put her car into reverse just as I was entering. I couldn't swerve out of the way because there was an SUV parked right at the mouth of the entrance, taking up half the available space. So I reacted and honked my horn. She proceeded to panic, threw the car into drive, and ran it into a small boulder that lines the driveway. It ripped the passenger side air deflector clean off. According to her, I'm now a frigging a-hole for honking my horn for no reason. Story 5. We had a new boy in the office who had no idea what personal hygiene consisted of. Not a great start. He was loud and obnoxious and not even good at his job. Then, one day, at the smoking shelter, he started talking about catching rabbits in traps. He was pointing to the fields around the building and saying he was going to ask for permission to put traps out there. We laughed. For all the ridiculous things he talked about, not one of us took him seriously. When we went back inside, he headed straight to the cubicle of our office manager. This cubicle was adorned with pictures of rabbits. Some were her pets, and some were just rabbits she thought were cute. She had statues, rabbit pens, and pencils. Nobody in their right mind would have asked this woman in this cubicle about going trapping rabbits. He did. I was surprised he made it to the end of the day. I was not surprised when he didn't return the day after. Story 6. A couple sat down at the movie theater about 15 minutes into the movie. The woman sat right beside me and immediately started holding a full conversation at full volume, while the man barely acknowledged her at all. I politely asked her to lower her voice because it was distracting. She stared straight ahead for about 2 minutes before leaning over and saying, "Maybe if you weren't listening to my conversation, you wouldn't be distracted." I was too livid to even respond, and the movie was completely ruined. Edit. The movie was Wonder Woman. I have definitely gotten employees for jerks at the movies before, but I felt like I might punch this woman if I even looked in her direction. Either way, she did lower her voice after that. Story 7. I have worked at Spirit Halloween every season for the past 5 years. I would highly recommend it if you're trying to make some spare cash. Anyway, super shady things happen at Spirit Halloween all the time, so I have endless stories to tell. For this story, I was working the dressing room, basically just regulating who goes in and taking costumes out of the bags to withhold accessories to prevent theft and so on. This was my first year working there, so I was about 20. Just a couple of days before Halloween, a girl around my age came to the dressing room with a typical college girl costume. That's all I'll say. She said something like, "Oh, good. We're about the same size. I'm in a rush, so I wouldn't have time to find an associate to help me." I just kind of smiled and took the bag from her, like, what the hell does that even mean? I unpacked the costume, left the accessories, and put it in a basket to carry to the dressing room. She looked really confused, so I just asked her to follow me and I'd get her a dressing room. I wish I was making this up, but this girl says to me, "Why would I go back there for you to change?" Huh? I can't even remember exactly how I responded because I was so confused, but it was something along the lines of, "You try on the costume yourself so you know how it fits. An associate doesn't do it for you." And this girl had the audacity to be mad at me for saying that. Her response was basically, "Well, I don't want to have to get out of my clothes and change into the costume, so it isn't worth my time." That's so unsanitary to have a bunch of people trying the costume on instead of you just doing it, so I don't even want it anymore. Followed by her storming out. Story 8. My friend and I, both around 14 at the time, snuck some of my dad's whiskey while my parents were out. We each had a few sips from the bottle, did the obligatory, "Ah, it burns." And that was about it, at first. A few minutes later, my friend started acting really drunk. He was crashing into walls, falling down, and slurring his speech. I was thinking there's no way this kid is actually drunk. We had like 1/4 of a milliliter of that whiskey. I didn't even feel anything, except the lingering little burn in my throat. He's gotta be faking it. Then he started dry heaving, smashed a lamp, and went toward the TV like he was going to grab it. I had to literally bear hug him while he fought like he was resisting arrest. He was foaming at the mouth and screaming, and wouldn't you know it, just like that, he sobered up and relaxed. So in the span of 5 minutes, he got drunk from a sip of whiskey, wrecked my house, fought me like a wild animal, and then sobered up. Story 9. This only happened a few days ago. I got called into the manager's office and was offered the temporary clothing manager position. I didn't necessarily want a manager's position, but I had basically been doing the job for months without the benefits, so I accepted it. I went out onto the shop floor and was immediately greeted with "congrats" from colleagues. A girl I work with who had recently become a duty manager, how she became a manager is beyond me, went and told everyone my business, including the fact that she had been offered the job first and turned it down. So that's why it was handed to me. Everyone knew I was being offered the position before I did. 15 minutes later, I was approached by a different manager saying there was an issue with putting me on the system, but they were trying to rectify it. For the next 2 hours, I listened to the girl telling everyone and anyone how hard she was going to have it, now having to cover the clothing department as well as her own. She told colleagues, friends, and even customers who didn't ask. She made my business known to everyone. Eventually, I was brought into the office and officially told that I wouldn't be the clothing manager. My boss had missed a deadline to put me on the system. The manager apologized profusely and I went back out onto the floor, only to hear the new duty manager telling my story yet again. Longest shift ever. Story 10. I used to work at the register of my college campus store. People mostly came in to buy energy drinks, gum, or whatever, but you could also buy sweatshirts and even computers. Given that most people only bought one small thing, we didn't have carts or baskets anywhere for shoppers. Anyway, one day a woman came in, a student's mom I'm guessing, and asked me for help reaching a sweater on the top shelf. I grabbed it for her and went to hand it to her, but she motioned for me to hold on. She proceeded to walk around the store, grabbing several items and giving them to me to hold. She literally shopped for about 10 minutes, using me as her personal shopping cart. Luckily, I had a coworker in the store on the same shift, so he was able to handle the register. At the end of this whole ridiculous segment, she got a message on her phone, read it, and said, "Oh, you know what? I actually have to go meet my son. I'll come back later to get the things I need." And then she left. and I was left standing there with an armful of random stuff that I then had to put back, one by one. Like, come on, woman. Edit. To those calling me a bish or saying, they would never do that, I applaud your bravery. I was an 18-year-old kid who was pretty excited to have a job to begin with and was scared of losing it from being rude to a customer. I definitely spent some solid time in the shower thinking about how I would have handled it differently. Story 11. I used to be the community admin for an online game about a decade ago, and there was a guy who had been perma-banned but kept making new accounts to protest his ban on the official forums and try to get people to rally behind him to unban him, or even post malicious links to scam others. Our GM staff was largely outsourced, so I did most of the forum moderation on my own. He had obvious and telling posting habits and horrendous grammar, so it was usually easy to know if it was him. A quick check of an IP address would usually confirm it, and the account would be banned and posts deleted where appropriate. Well, this idiot one day, using a bunch of different accounts, I'm not even sure why, banning was easy on my end, made like 20 messages supporting himself, all logging in and out repeatedly. He created a long chain of posts trying to deliberately bribe me out in the open to unban his account. Not even a private message, just straight up in a new thread, offering me cash to do so. For one, I started the job as a player and was recruited for my honesty and ethics within the community. It wasn't happening, and the cash was negligible compared to what I was being paid. Second, how dumb does one have to be to think someone would accept a deal like that with everyone watching? Did he really think I would be so stupid as to fall for something like blackmail by showing any sign of interest? I had the webmaster IP block him after that since he was using a static IP and left the thread open for posterity to prove the point. Story 12. I used to work for my roommate's mom and stepdad, doing insulation work in crawl spaces and attics. My pay was set up so that I always got paid the same amount no matter how many hours I worked, which was ridiculous because I almost always worked at least 40 hours a week. Anyway, one day my boss collected the pay for a job early and told us we had to finish that day, which initially was fine. A 14-hour workday later, I felt it was considerably less fine, but I did it and didn't voice a single complaint. The next day, I called to tell them I was going to wrap up early. I had reached a good stopping point, and it was only 2 hours early. She proceeded to tell me that she was going to dock my pay for the week if I left before 4, and I calmly explained that I had just worked 14 hours the previous day, that I have a life, and that I needed time to wash clothes, buy groceries, etc. She then said to me that I maybe should have gotten the job done quicker the previous day if I knew I had things to take care of. It was at this point that I nearly lost it. Like, did you think I was just hanging out in this man's crawl space having the time of my life? Icing on the cake. I drove over to talk about it with them, and we agreed I should be paid hourly. They then proceeded to cut my hours to 25 to 30 per week for 3 weeks. I quit shortly thereafter. Story 13. A few years ago, a guest at the restaurant I run thought that her purse had been stolen. She demanded that I lock down the restaurant and search guests and staff. I told her that wasn't plausible, but I would review all of the security cameras and let her know what I found. While we waited for an officer to arrive, her husband and I tried to calm her down, asking when she last had it, whether she had left it in the car, and so on. When the officer arrived, she was still in hysterics, eyeballing everyone who was exiting the restaurant and still demanding that our staff be searched. The officer at this point asked her to calm down, and her response was, "Would you tell a woman who had just been essayed to calm down?" The husband, the officer, and I all just stared at each other. We ended up reviewing the security footage, and it turned out she never had it with her. It was in the trunk of the car. Story 14. Mine happened when we went out drinking with 4 of my friends from college and played Never Have I Ever at a bar. A friend of mine, let's call her B for Bish, knew something about me that I was very embarrassed about, and it made me anxious even thinking about it. B knew these too. Naturally, she brought up this very specific thing in the game, then looked at me directly, making it obvious to everyone at the table that I had, in fact, done this thing. This hurt me, but that was not actually my "is this Bish serious" moment. It came afterward, when another friend realized how uncomfortable I was. To keep the game going and move on from me, she did the same thing with B, telling the table something that B had done. Long story short, B flipped out in the middle of the bar, started yelling at my friend for being rude and exposing her to all of us, humiliating her, and so on. This might not sound that irrational from her side, but the catch is that we all already knew about B's thing because she had told us and other classmates about it numerous times, whereas with mine, she was the only person who knew. Needless to say, we are no longer friends with B after that night. Story 15. My company offers sizable monthly production bonuses. They are supposed to be paid on the second pay period of the following month. I earned the top bonus in March but did not get paid in April. I've been fighting with management for my money. They claim I earned a lower tier bonus, despite evidence to the contrary. They said they changed the bonus structure, despite not telling anyone. Skip to last Friday. It had now been over a month of not getting paid. Bonus, I'm still receiving my regular paychecks. A supervisor asked if I had any issues in my department. They meant issues directly tied to production. I said that I was pretty upset about not getting the money I earned. He told me not to let personal matters affect my work. Today, just before leaving, a different supervisor asked why I didn't complete one of my tasks. I said that I was getting extremely frustrated with the money situation. He told me not to let it affect my performance. Let me repeat. He told me not to let the fact that I am not getting paid affect my work. Are these people serious? Story 16. I worked at a popular bakery cafe chain. A woman ordered a salad online with walnuts in it and then came to the store to pick it up. She immediately opened the entire bag, looked in the salad, and started yelling at me that she had a son with a nut allergy, that we could have killed him, and so on. She said, I specifically wrote in the notes that there was a nut allergy. I took a look at the receipt. Under every item, all ingredients were listed as usual. There was no note. I smiled politely and remade her salad with no comment, but on the inside, I was screaming. Fast forward a week or two, she orders the same thing again, and I recognize the name. Only this time, I don't put the walnuts in the salad, even though she again didn't write a note. She comes in, grabs the bag, and does the same thing all over again, quivering with rage as I could see she was getting ready to harass me over some damn nuts once more. She pauses as she gets to the salad, sees no nuts, looks at the receipt, and then starts yelling at me for not putting nuts in because she hadn't asked for them to be taken out. This salad was for me. Remake it now. Story 17. It was my sophomore year of high school, and there was a girl in my history class who thought she was really woke. One day, she brought up how maps are often skewed in size to favor more white countries or continents. Her example was how Africa is often much smaller in scale than it should be. I didn't really care about this claim because she sounded pretty sure about it, and honestly, I didn't know if she was right or not. But then, she brought up how California is actually larger than Russia, and that map makers often mess this up. Now, I'm no geographer, but I knew that was so absurdly wrong, so I assumed she was joking and just started laughing. She looked at me and got really defensive, saying it was 100% true. All I could do was blankly stare at her as she rambled on for 5 minutes straight about how California was bigger than Russia. Eventually, I had to save her from herself and look it up in front of her. The sizes are something like 160,000 square miles for California and 6,600,000 square miles for Russia. Story 18. I visited my grandparents for the holidays in a northern part of the state. All of our family went together and stayed in their fairly large house for several days. On the second day, I tried to organize a family game for everyone to play since nobody seemed to be doing much of anything. Nobody wanted to play any of the games I suggested, so my husband and I pulled out our magic, the gathering cards that we had brought, and started to play together. My mom approached me in the middle of a game and said, I can't believe you brought a game like that to a family gathering. You two have isolated yourselves from everyone else by choosing to play your nerd game instead of mingling with family. Everyone else was just talking and watching TV, and we did end up getting my sister to join us for a game, so I don't know what her problem was. Later that same day, I got really tired from running around in the woods with a couple of my family members and decided to take a nap on the couch downstairs. I was awoken by my mom, who looked concerned and asked if I was feeling okay. I told her I was fine, just tired, and she suddenly switched. It's too bad. You came all the way here not to spend any time with your family. We were putting together a game upstairs and everyone was asking, where's Raven? But we couldn't find you. So basically, she got mad at me for playing my own game with my husband when nobody was interested in hanging out with me, but later, when I'm tired and trying to sleep, everyone decides to play a game together, and I'm at fault for not wanting to spend time with family? Story 19. When I was about 13, my mom kicked me out of her house after a pretty brutal fight. Finally, she told me, fine, then you can get the hell out of my house. I was pretty sick of her at this point. She had been abusing me and my brother, stealing what little our recently deceased grandmother had left us, and so on. So I just said fine, grabbed my stuff, and left. I called my father, my parents had been divorced a long time, and told him what had happened, explaining that I was walking to my nearby former elementary school. I asked if he could pick me up there. He said yes, and I hung up. About 5 minutes later, my dad called me back saying he had just received a call from the sheriff, who told him that my mother had reported me as a runaway. My dad picked me up, and we met the sheriff and my mother. I explained everything to the sheriff while my mother repeatedly told me that what I was saying wasn't true. She even interrupted the sheriff a few times. Story 20. My supervisor threatened to fire me because I took 2 days off with notice, but she forgot. I requested 2 days off in advance and received written approval from her. I came back into the office on Wednesday and I was locked out of my computer. The operations manager thought I had ghosted the company and stolen the company laptop because that's what my supervisor told him. I explained the situation to him and he said everything was fine. Later that afternoon, my supervisor spoke to me explaining how she was about to fire me. I told her I had already spoken to the operations manager who was above her and he had no problem. I also explained how this was entirely her fault for forgetting. She was speechless and refused to apologize for her mistake. I ended up working there for 2 more months and used the operations manager as a reference for a new job. F that bish. Story 21. When I was in high school, one of my friends had the same birthday as me, but I was a year older. For my 18th birthday, I asked him to have his birthday party on another day so our mutual friends wouldn't have to choose between the two. He suggested we throw one big party instead. Then I was like, cool, let's do that. And it would have been really fun if his mom hadn't shown up halfway through the party and gone on a screaming rant about what a selfish a-hole I am and how I had stolen her son's birthday by being born on the same day. She literally demanded that I apologize for being born on the same day. Even my friend was like, Bish, are you serious? Another time, she bought this massive book on astrology that had 365 entries, one for every day of the year, and read my friend's horoscope out loud saying, that is so you. That describes you perfectly. I then pointed out that I had the same birthday and that it didn't describe me at all, and obviously, he and I had very different personalities. She got so pissed at me, like it was my fault that her stupid astrology book was stupid, and we were all like, Bish, are you serious? Story 22. I went to an opera last year where a whole family with 2 little girls sat in the row in front of me. The girls kept whispering, no big deal. They were like 5 years old and excited. They were easily the best behaved out of the entire group. The adults in the family, however, kept talking and pulling out their phones to check Twitter. That's distracting to most people, but I have some really bad issues with lights in dim settings, and all I could see were bluish-white circles covering my vision. After intermission, they weren't there, and I felt relieved, until they all filed in 5 minutes after the start of the second act, carrying snacks. Intermission is literally for using the bathroom and getting concessions so you don't interrupt the opera. One of the women loudly crunches peanut M&Ms with her mouth open every so often, with just long enough of a break between each crunch that you start to relax, only for your teeth to get set on edge again. Then they get up and shuffle around, with the grandma moving up a row to sit with the little girls. More talking, eating, phone browsing. About 20 minutes in, they start loudly fretting that the girls are up past their bedtime. They shuffle themselves around a bit more, then grandma takes the girls and Soloway leads them out. Some more phones, some more M&Ms, and finally at last the rest of them all get up at once and file. Out, still very much in the middle of the production. The only comfort in all this was knowing that an usher was right behind me and saw everything, and after the show, all of us in that spot were just bishing to each other and laughing at how awful it was. The very next day, the Metropolitan Opera House was streaming another opera to a local movie theater, and I went to see that too. Even in a movie theater where you could bring in food, leave whenever you wanted without too much judgment, and whisper to each other, that crowd was so much better behaved than the one that paid like 8 times the price to be in a fancy opera house. Story 23. I was standing in line for a Lana Del Rey pop-up store. A boomer woman had paid to get to the front of a line that, as far as pop-ups go, wasn't even that long. I waited 12 hours at the Kanye line. Well, the security guard got wind of it and refused her entry. I felt bad for the guy as she called him every name in the book, but not so. Bad since the entire line was vocally against her and cheering him on. She alleged that making her wait in the sun would give her heat stroke, that the organizers were putting people in danger, and so on. It was like 71 degrees with trees on the sidewalk. So she leaves, and we think that's that. Nope. The woman called the police because apparently that's a thing the police show up for in Hollywood. I can only imagine the conversation, which was just out of earshot. I actually felt super bad for her teenage daughter, who was clearly embarrassed that they got caught paying for a place in line and just wanted to leave. Story 24. I started out messing around with photography for fun and eventually was able to start charging people for it. A girl I had gone to high school with who used to comment on every picture I posted of myself and others with, "Wow, love this. Would love to shoot sometime." So after about 6 months, my work schedule changed and we were finally able to set up a time. I drove 40 minutes out of my way to her house and then she wanted to drive another 30 to a location. Okay, cool, no issue. We start shooting. The pictures turned out awesome. As we were about to leave for the second location, she started talking about how she couldn't wait to edit the photos and go through every single one. Record scratch. I realized my mistake and apologized, saying, "Look, that's not really how it works unless we've discussed it beforehand. I call the photos, send you selection sheets, and you pick your favorites, then I edit them." She got upset immediately, like lightning fast. We called it a day, had the most awkward car ride back to her house, where she proceeded to try and nicely berate me for not giving her the raw files. She asked if it was an ego thing, mentioned that another photographer had done it, he hadn't, and that her boyfriend, who never liked me, told her she was going to waste her time by shooting with me. I held firm and explained all the industry reasons why you don't give out your raw files if you're trying to make a living from photography. For the next 2 days, she proceeded to message me, berating me for being a bish and keeping photos of her. After 2 days of trying to be as nice as possible, I finally just deleted her and blocked her. Then, that night, I received the most disgusting message I have ever received in my life. She told me I was disgusting, that the reason I had acne at the time was because I was a disgusting person, and it was coming out of my skin. Even bringing up fights I had had with my mother years earlier, I was absolutely gobsmacked. I took a deep breath, responded that I wished her well, and told her I only want love, growth, and happiness for her because she very obviously needed it. Bish. Story 25. I had a friend who was a complete a-hole driver. He thought it was funny to tailgate, not move at green lights until they turned yellow and then gun it so everyone behind him missed the light. He would never let people merge and so on. I truly hated ever being in a car with him. He also thought of himself as a real cool person. He had full sleeve tattoos, a shaved head, wore combat boots, and tried to give off this "I am a tough guy" vibe. I am not friends with him anymore. He was just too much to take. So one day he tailgated and blared his horn at a guy driving in front of us, I assume for driving too slowly or some other perceived slight. What happened next was glorious. The guy slammed on his brakes, got out of his car, walked over to the driver's side window of my friend's truck. The window was down because it was a hot summer day and said, "Did you just beep at me?" My friend, in his best tough guy voice, says, "Yeah, what the hell are you gonna do? He never finished the sentence because the guy threw a goddamn haymaker right into his face, knocking him completely out. I reached over and grabbed the e-brake so we didn't keep rolling. The guy just said, "Don't be a frigging a-hole," got back in his car and drove away. My buddy woke up a minute or so later, completely confused and on the verge of tears. He couldn't believe his actions actually had consequences. Anyway, he pretty much dropped the tough guy act after that and stopped driving like an a-hole. So thank you, random, angry one-punch man. Story 26. I ended up ending a 4-year relationship. We were engaged as well, because she had gone through my sister's purse, taken something out of it, tried to claim she thought it was hers, and just flat out refused to apologize for going through my sister's things. Instead of admitting she was in the wrong, she went out, walked the dog for an hour, then came back into the house screaming and crying. She proceeded to list off everything she hated about my sister. Highlights included that she didn't like her cooking, and that she wouldn't walk to the store with her at 9 p.m., neither of which are things I could possibly fix, as both are adult choices. There was a lot wrong with that relationship, but that was the last straw for me. I couldn't justify staying with someone who couldn't even simply apologize with a, "I'm sorry, I thought it was mine and I shouldn't have gone through your things." That was wrong of me. God forbid. To this day, she fully thinks she was in the right and that I was taking my sister's side over her. Which, yeah, don't go through people's stuff without permission, Jesus Christ. Best decision of my life. Story 27. I work as a creative for a food company. My role doesn't usually involve creating output for specific customers to use, more for our own advertising, brochures, etc. But sometimes, for large customers, we make exceptions. A small business owner asked my colleague in sales if we could make him some posters. He was a new customer, and my colleague said yes to get him on board. Not ideal. He didn't send me the request until a day before my annual leave. I came back 2 weeks later, called the customer, and we agreed he'd send me some details and I'd get something to him over the next few days. His list arrived and he had very specific items like chili burger, special burger, etc. I was expecting generic images of takeaway food, so I asked him for images. He didn't have any. I politely explained that without actually building the burgers specifically as he would make them, the images wouldn't match, so there wasn't much point. He went off on one, accused me of wasting his time, said I should build them at our expense, then complained to my colleague and my director about the service. I found out days later he had spent a grand total of £200 with us last year. Didn't spend a single second more dealing with him. Bye-bye. Story 28. I had a friend a while ago whom I was getting fed up with because of her childish attitude, which she claimed was due to her ADHD. After trying to gradually break it off for a month, I finally called her out on her behavior, explaining that I could literally only deal with her when she was on her ADHD meds. She refused to take them because of headaches, which I understood. But the problem was that she refused to look for a better solution and instead used her ADHD as an excuse for her consistently bishy behavior. I tried to be polite, but this girl didn't like being called out and dropped this line on me. Saying you can't hang out or handle me without my meds is like me not wanting to be friends with you because you had cancer. It hadn't even been a year since my last chemo treatment. I was glad to be rid of her that day. What made it worse was that a mutual friend called me a liar and threatened me for hurting her, followed by someone I didn't know sending me texts from unknown numbers, threatening and harassing me for about a month. Nothing ever came of it, so it's not my problem anymore. Update. This same friend just reconnected with me today, 2 days after I remembered the story and posted it, apologizing genuinely for everything. To my knowledge, they don't have Reddit, so I found it surprising that after nearly a decade, she popped into my messenger. 9 years can change people for sure. Cheers, everyone. Story 29. I am part of a team working on a project at my job with strict deadlines. One of the people on the team, let's nickname her Rhonda, likes to take up a lot of time without actually saying anything of value. During one of the team meetings, a task came up that one of our team members had done a lot of research on. Immediately, Rhonda jumps in and says, "I'll do it, and I want to work with other person who's done no research." Our lead pointed out that the other team member already had a lot of resources and needed to be included. "No," said Rhonda. "I don't want to work with her." Rhonda had never worked with any of us one-on-one or even in person. We're all remote right now, so it's not like anyone had given her a dirty look or cooked fish in the communal microwave. She was new to the team. Everyone stared at each other while the lead basically forced her to work with a team member who had done the research. Then Rhonda said, "Well, it's busy, so it's not going to be done by the deadline." It was an extremely simple task, just putting together a roadmap. The lead expressed that this was a critical project and the deadline, an entire week away, was non-negotiable. "Well, I don't know what to tell you. I have other things to do. I'm busy. Not happening." Yeah, Rhonda was kicked off the project and was quickly let go. We got that task done in half an hour later that same day. Story 30. My favorite was this woman who, in February of this year, refused to tell us why she wanted to return a shoe because she had already spent about half an hour explaining her story to the wrong person. This happened on a Sunday morning, so it was dead quiet in our shoe store. A lady walked in who worked in another department store in the mall. She was nicely dressed in a navy blue blazer and pants and was asking about some shoes. Out of the 3 of us on shift, one of my coworkers went to get a shoe and then called the other coworker to help when she could not find it after a while, leaving me alone on the floor. Enter the Karen of this story, walking in with a shoe she had bought and starting to look around for other options. I went to her, greeted her, and offered my assistance. She gave me a stern glare and said, "No, I want to talk to her," pointing at our only other customer. Thinking she just wanted a woman's opinion, I backed off and let them talk. By this point, my coworkers were arranging for the delivery of the shoe that the suit-wearing customer wanted, but that we did not have. When everything was said and done, this lady walked out of the store. The Karen, now looking confused, demanded to know where she was going. Since our store does not have a uniform, only requiring a lanyard and branded shoes, we were all dressed pretty casually. Naturally, she assumed that the suited woman was the manager, despite her wearing nothing that identified her as an employee here. What followed was 20 minutes of enraged shrieking as this woman complained about how nobody came to help her. A blatant lie, how she needed to replace this shoe but would not say why because it's a long story, a story she had just told a random stranger, and how she did not want to repeat herself. She also insisted she was going to report all of us to our managers. This was my favorite part because every time we tried to give her the contact information of the people she wanted to report us to, she refused to accept any of it, convinced we were clearly going to give fake details and lie to our bosses about what had happened. She ended up storming out, screaming her head off. Story 31. I worked for a major cell carrier doing IT and warranty replacements. A customer called up and demanded we replace their phone. We couldn't because they hadn't paid their bill in about 6 months. I told them, "Once your payments are up to date, we'd be happy to process a replacement device for you since yours won't turn on anymore." They got mad, saying, "You're not upholding your end of the agreement." I had to stop them and say, "No, that's not how this works. The agreement is you give us money and you get services, including replacements in the event the device fails. You have an extended warranty. But since you're not actually paying anything, also known as not upholding your end of the agreement, you forced our hand. Our end of the agreement says you won't get a replacement if you don't pay your bill. By signing up for the services, you've agreed to the terms of service, and it's all in there. They hung up. Fine by me. Story 32. There's a girl at my college studying criminal justice. She was about to fail the lowest level of math the school offered for a second time, and a friend of hers asked me to tutor her for the final. I was in Calculus 2 at the time. I was going over PEMDAS when she asked why she even needed to know math. I explained that if she became an attorney, she would need to figure out what to charge clients. Or if she became a cop, she would need to calculate speeds and ticket prices. She asked what I meant, so I explained. If you and another car are driving toward each other, and when you pass, your radar says they were going 80 miles per hour, and your speedometer says you're going 40 miles per hour, you'll have to subtract your speed to get theirs. So that's 80 minus 40. At this point, I realized her eyes had glazed over and she wasn't listening. After waiting 10 seconds for a response, I looked at her and said, Can you add? She replied, Yeah, I can do that. I said, Okay, let's just move on then, I suppose. Can you multiply? She said, Yeah, no, not at all. The best part? Her college is free and fully paid for, so she can get the degree and sit on her rear end, while I bust my butt to stay above a 3.5 GPA and still wind up paying thousands a semester. Story 33. When I worked retail at the mall, one of the other employees was walking me out after my shift one afternoon. We were chatting right before I left, and she saw a woman who looked like she needed help, so she went to check on her. But it was no big deal. When my coworker came back, we were still chatting and laughing. The woman thought we were laughing and making fun of her, asked to speak to the manager, and then went to another employee to get our names. At that point, since my shift was over anyway, my coworker told me I should probably just go home. To be fair, the lady did have possibly the biggest nose I had ever seen, and I was definitely thinking it, but we never mentioned it out loud. When I got in the next day, our store manager had already spoken to the lady, but we weren't disciplined at all. The manager just said, if she has a big enough complex to think people are talking about her constantly, she just needs to go get a nose job. Story 34. I was married young to a woman with serious anger issues. She was the first, second, and last woman to give me a black eye. We were together for 7 years. In retrospect, she was probably bipolar, as she would randomly start attacking me over some of the strangest things. I was once standing in my living room on a nice summer day. She, I, and the neighbor were having a normal conversation. I was standing with my back to the window, listening to my wife speak, when my neighbor exclaimed, "Hey, Jesse, look at that!" I turned and saw a semi-attractive woman walk by the door. I turned back as quickly as I looked, and no sooner had I done so than my wife's fist connected with my face. I had never cheated, suggested, or even looked at another woman for any unfaithful purpose, and never did until our divorce. In retrospect, the divorce was a better story. One incident involved me escorting a 17-year-old boy off my couch and out of my house bare while my drunk wife was still asleep. She thought I had offed him when she woke up 3 hours later. I ended up in the hospital after she was done with me. She had kicked me in the groin hard enough that a testicle was pushed somewhere it shouldn't have been. I was always raised to believe hitting a woman is wrong, but I came close that day. After getting out of the hospital, I had to laugh when she came by and started screaming at me hysterically that she still wanted to be with me and wanted to have my baby. I literally asked her if she was serious. I told her to get out, and she went and got a restraining order against me. I was truly in awe. Story 35. My wonderful and lovely grandmother has leukemia and has to get treatments each month at the start of the month. I'll sometimes drive her home if she feels weak afterward, but she usually has one of her siblings do it. They're all retired at this point, so they're happy to help most of the time. Or one of her children, usually my uncle, but very rarely my mother. Once, my mother agreed to bring my grandmother back to her home from the cancer center in town a week ahead of time, an hour-and-a-half drive, and was supposed to show up at 1 o'clock when the treatment was supposed to be over. My mother is disabled and doesn't work, and at the time, she didn't even have a valid license. She had no other commitments at all, so it should have gone fine, and it had previously when she was asked to do the same thing. Now, I get a call from my grandmother while I'm at work that afternoon around 2:30, and she said that she couldn't get a hold of my mom at all and didn't have anyone else to give her a ride for another 2 or 3 hours. She just wanted to go home and rest. My boss let me leave work to take her home. After I did and got back to my place, I saw my mom on Facebook and gave her a call. I asked her, "Why didn't you show up to pick Mama up? She waited nearly 2 hours for you and you've ghosted her all day." My mom said, "Well, I didn't have gas money." And she said she didn't have it to give me, so I figured, one of you boys, I have 2 brothers, and I'm the only one with a vehicle, meaning me here, would pick her up, and it wouldn't be a big deal. I asked her why she didn't tell anyone, and she said, "Well, it worked out, right? It's not like she was going to die waiting for me." I sat there, my phone barely at my ear, in a state of utter disbelief at the selfishness and laziness displayed by her that day. I was so appalled that my grandmother and I didn't talk to my mother for a few months. Now, my mother is close to death and my grandmother is doing a lot better. So, go figure how life works out sometimes. Story 36. This happened my freshman year in high school during my Earth and Environmental Science study hall. My friend and I had to go to Earth and Environmental Science for our study hall, or Smart Lunch, as we called it. My friend was absent the day before, so she asked me if she could have the notes from that day. I obliged and let her copy off my notes while I did the homework that had been assigned at the beginning of the week. As I was doing this, I looked up at my teacher. Her face was red with anger, and she said no to both me and my friend. She told us that this was unacceptable behavior and that we needed to call our parents. I'm the kid who doesn't usually get in trouble, and when I do, my face gets really red. Mind you, this was after lunch. My friend and I headed outside of the classroom, and she proceeded to call her mom. Her mom didn't pick up, so I went first. When my mom picked up, she asked what was wrong and said she was in the parking lot. I anxiously said no, it's fine, and in a monotone voice said, I regret to inform you, but by my actions, I have to tell you that I was caught cheating. My mom had the phone handed to my teacher, and I heard her ask, so, helping is cheating? My teacher began to sound flustered because of the sheer ridiculousness of why I had to call my mom. My teacher handed back my phone, and I told my mom that I was very sorry and really embarrassed. She said, I know, told me she loved me, and hung up. Going home, I expected to be yelled at and grounded, but my mom asked me what my side of the story was. I told her, and she laughed. I asked, well, what's so funny? She then proceeded to tell me that my teacher was a dumb bish who needed to check her syllabus. She also explained that when she was asking the teacher if helping was cheating, the teacher began dodging the question and just kept switching up her accusations to get me in more trouble. Then she said I should have called my father instead because of how he would have handled it, by calling the teacher an idiot for wasting his time. So, that's my story. Story 37. There was this girl I had a class with before, and while I tried to be polite, she was just kind of disrespectful. Instead of doing her work, she would go on Instagram and other apps, even though the teacher told her not to. One time she was on Instagram again, scrolling, taking selfies, and so on, after the teacher had told her not to. She clearly didn't care because she was sitting at the table closest to the teacher and directly in the teacher's line of sight. The teacher called her vain and something else. I think he said disrespectful or something along those lines, and took her phone away. She begged, please, I'll be good, in an attempt to get her to phone back, which she eventually did at the end of class. Later in the year, there was an application process for students who wanted to move up into the advanced class next year. Her best friend got in, but she didn't, though I don't think she even applied. I saw her begging the teacher to be allowed in that class. The teacher mentioned her behavior and her lack of application. She pleaded, saying that her friend was her best friend and that she would be good. The teacher said no, and added that she and her friend would have to stay apart for an hour. Story 38. Mine happened recently. My wife and I closed on our first house this past Friday, and the previous owner had a person renting out the home. She had told us weeks ago that she would move out the following weekend, Saturday after we closed, and have all her stuff gone. Keep in mind she had known we were purchasing the house for about a month and a half. Also, she never had an actual lease with the previous owner or with us. She just paid him rent. Now, come Saturday, my wife and I went over to the house to see if we needed to clean it or fix anything before we moved in. When we got there, nothing had changed at all. She hadn't moved a thing. So we asked her, hey, what's up? Why haven't you moved at all? Also, keep in mind, she was being completely difficult about everything. Her lazy response was, well, I just didn't get around to it. That's right. A house now completely owned by my wife, and I was still inhabited by some random lady who essentially refused to move her stuff. At that point, I was pretty furious. I guess that's my specific this bish serious moment. But I was trying to be nice and pleasant, so I told her, okay, you have until Tuesday. She started yelling and getting angry, but at that point I just said, have a good one, and left. The next day, my brother and I went over to make sure she was moving, and of course, she wasn't. Then she came outside saying, legally, I have until the 4th of June. You have to give me 30 days. I have no idea where she got the 4th from. I replied, well, legally, you're trespassing on private property, and I could call the law on you. Also keep in mind, she had already been paying for another apartment and could have moved her stuff at any time. She got angry again and slammed the door on me, so I left, prepared to call the law on Tuesday. Thankfully, I had scared her enough with the threat of legal action that she was out by Tuesday. That was a good thing, except she left a huge mess. She broke one of the floorboard transitions, scratched the absolute hell out of the hardwood floors while moving everything, and smashed a bunch of glass in the basement. She was literally disgusting. My wife, several family members, and I have spent the last day trying to sanitize and disinfect everything and get all of her stuff moved. She was a heavy smoker, so everywhere she had a picture or something on the wall, there is an outline. We're currently trying to figure out how to make the naughty pine interior match and get rid of those outlines. Story 39. When I was a child, arguing with my parents, I was distraught and crying, trying to express my feelings of hopelessness, insecurity, and a complete lack of will to want to be anywhere. As a kid, that was the only way I knew how to express feelings that were really about not wanting to be alive. Because of a birth injury, I was prevented from ever living out my dreams of being a star athlete. During one argument, my parents finally admitted that they were the ones who had kept me from tryouts year after year. They would always tell me I needed doctor's permission, and then they would say, "We would let you." But the doctor said no. I yelled, "No, you don't know what it's like to be forced to be different, to be told you'll never be able to do the one thing you've wanted forever." My mother's response made me furious. She said, "You don't know what it's like to be a parent and watch your child be different than the other kids." All I could think was, wow, you've lied to me my whole life, straight to my face. You crushed my dreams year after year. You slept soundly. And all you can say to me while I'm pouring out my deepest sadness is, "What about how I feel?" She followed that by telling me, "You're my child, and I decide what's best for you. When you turn 18, if you want to go out there and get yourself hurt forever, then that's your choice. Until then, pick a new dream." I was never the same after that moment. It still hurts to think about the what-ifs wrapped around everything that led up to that evening. Story 40. I had recently purchased an off-lease CPO vehicle, my first car, and had the insurance photos taken the day before the incident. A coworker asked me if my license plate was X, then told me to head to the parking lot, where I found a middle-aged woman had hit my car. Instead of backing out of the spot and then turning the wheel, she had just turned the wheel immediately. She was about to do it again after returning to her car when I stopped her and offered to back her car out for her, which I did. Once her car was out, she ceased being the apologetic woman I had first met. She started asking how I knew the missing paint on my car was from hers. Only after I pointed out that my car had no other marks, that there was a crowd of witnesses, half of whom were lawyers, and the multitude of paint streaks on her car from other hits, did she finally concede it was her fault. Story 41. When I was younger, I worked at a fast food restaurant. I was on drive-thru during a rush. If you've ever worked a rush hour in fast food, you know how hectic it can be. A lady came through in the middle of it and ordered a couple of baked potatoes. She got her meal and left. 2 hours later, she came back upset that she didn't get the plastic dinnerware, specifically a knife and fork. I apologized and asked her to pull up to the window. I offered to have her food remade since it had been so long, but she said no. She only wanted the forks. I reached into where they were supposed to be. Everything was supposed to be separate, but somehow they had gotten mixed up. I grabbed 2 pieces and handed them to her. She pulled off only to immediately come inside, screaming about her dinnerware. I had accidentally handed her a knife and a fork, not 2 forks. She started making a scene, cussing at me. I was a minor at the time, crying and saying she had been treated horribly. Even other customers were trying to get her to chill out. I apologized again and again to no avail. By this time, my manager was so fed up that she took the entire bulk box of forks, threw them onto the counter, and told the lady to pick one and get out. The lady was shocked. I was super proud of my normally demure manager that day. Story 42. When I used to work for a residential care facility, we had a client who was having a very hard time due to some rather asinine changes to his medication regimen. He struggled with huge outbursts, and almost all of us got our asses kicked pretty regularly. One day, during a particularly painful week for me and some coworkers, his mom came in like a hurricane, yelling, "What have you all done to my kid?" She had her grown children in tow, carrying armfuls of sugary food, regular soda, cake, candy, tubs of ice cream, and various other items. I explained the situation regarding the sweets. This client was pre-diabetic and could not have any access to sugary foods because he was dangerously close to developing type 2 diabetes. A bad binge could have pushed him over the edge. She gave him all the junk food to take to his room without talking with us first, and completely ignored all of us staff trying to explain why this was a bad idea due to his health. Complications. A day or 2 later, he had the worst behavioral episode he ever had, amped up on sugar and caffeine, and the staff got beaten even more than usual trying to manage it. As the shift leader at the time, I was super pissed about this. Luckily, it only happened once or twice because my manager raised a huge fuss, citing sabotage of his medical needs, treatment plans, and staff safety. After that, his mom was required to follow visitor protocols. She wasn't at all happy about it, but Story 43. I asked one of my roommates to keep her cat in her room at night so that I could sleep and be up for work in the morning without the cat crying outside my door. She responded by shutting her cat out of her room at night, accusing me of being petty with the vacuuming, and with all-out declarations of war, sending super weird messages like, "You've done it now, bish. You've made your bed, and now you'll lie in it. Girl, are you serious? You do nothing but smoke weed all day and wait for your next welfare check to buy more weed. I asked you to look after your cat." It came to a halt when she directly threatened me. She was given 2 weeks to find somewhere else to live, and I went to stay with my mother. It would have been kind of funny if I wasn't convinced that she was so detached from reality that she might actually stab me. Story 44. I worked a dead-end job at a car service place. We did quick oil changes and light repairs. One day, an older-ish lady came in with her new Ford Fiesta for its first oil change. We finished the service pretty quickly. It is less complicated on a new car. I delivered the car back to the customer in the typical fashion. "Yes, ma'am, everything looks great. She's still a new car. Have a great day." She hopped in the car and drove away. 10 minutes later, I saw her approaching my desk with a sour look on her face. "What did you do to my car?" she yelled. I was completely clueless as to what she was implying, so I walked out to the car with her to take a look. She opened the rear door and pointed at the window crank. "You switched my doors." I was dumbfounded. "I'm sorry, what?" I asked. She said with even more aplomb, "Why did you switch my doors? I had power windows and now I have roll-up windows." For background, the early Ford Fiesta had power windows in the front and roll-up windows in the back. Do not ask me why. Ford does some weird stuff sometimes. "Ma'am, they are all that way," I said, as I realized the level of crazy I had just unearthed. "No, they are not. And I had power windows. You changed out my doors." At that point, I bowed out and let my manager deal with her. He showed her 3 other cars on the lot exactly like hers. She probably still thinks her car has some random doors from a base model Fiesta with roll-up windows. Story 45. I am responsible for one. Years ago, I lived in a swanky part of town and would frequent a car wash. At this car wash, I would pull up, pay, and then go sit on some lawn chairs while they ran my car through the wash, vacuumed it, and brought it back to me. I did this every weekend. Fast forward a few years, I moved and found a new car wash. For a month straight, I would pull my car up and pay, then proceed to hand my keys to the attendant and go sit off to the side. One time, I even commented to the girl that she needed to vacuum better because there were some crumbs left behind. I would always tip, so that is good. But this new car wash was self-service. I was forcing some kid to run my car through the wash, dry it, and vacuum it for free, and then I would throw $5 their way while I chilled in their lawn chair. I only realized this after wondering why I was the only customer sitting on the only available lawn chair. I never went back out of sheer embarrassment. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.